What is up, Bleacher Report? Jesse here with Last Second Sports coming at you with another 49ers Daily. I hope you are having a fantastic evening. And man, I got to say, over the last week, things sure have changed for me as a fan when it comes to the direction of this team. But John Lynch recently spoke to the media at a Stanford Pro Day, and this could not have come at a better time for me as a fan. Maybe you felt the same way. Heck, maybe you don't even know that he spoke to the media. We're going to go through all of that. But before we do, I want to talk about why, to me as a fan, it was so important the timing of hearing from John Lynch. Because over the last week, since we last spoke here on Bleacher Report, I have gone through a whirlwind of emotions as a fan. First, I was extremely happy with what seemed to be a clear direction for the 49ers and what they were looking to do. It was clear that they were trying to clear as much cap space as possible while also making sure that they take those hits this year so that moving forward, they could have a ton of cap space, be flexible, also sign the players that they want to sign, that they deem as the core players, whether that's Kittle or Fred Warner or Brock Purdy, what have you. And they would have the flexibility moving forward. You crush the draft this year, you crush the draft next year, your players in free agency, and boom, you're right back in contention. But to me, the plan got a little bit muddy over the last few days. And they got muddy because of what happened with Kyle Juszczyk amongst other players. So, as you know, Kyle Juszczyk was cut from the 49ers. He was brought back to the 49ers on a new, reworked 2-year deal. Now, on the surface, not a big deal. I really could care less whether Kyle Juszczyk is on the team or not. To me, I don't think he's that important to the team, especially when we're talking about a team that is resetting this year and is not going to be in real contention for at least another year. So when I look at that team and I say, all right, well, you're got a 34-year-old fullback, take it or leave it. I don't really care. But it's more about how they went about the process of getting Juszczyk to take that pay cut with the team. Now, the pay cut he took helps Jed York save a little bit of money. Not much. We're talking very minimal amount, but some cash. But the process that they took means that they took a dead cap hit for no reason. They're actually paying more money on the cap this year than what they were prior. And we know how the league works. The 49ers just did this with Deebo Samuel, where you give a player permission to go seek a deal, see what their worth is in the open market, and then that allows you to either rework that current deal that you have or maybe trade that player, cut that player, what have you. That's what they did with Kyle Juszczyk, except for they just cut him. He then went and found a new deal, brought it back to the 49ers, and then they worked on a contract. And because of that, they took unnecessary cap hits. So the path in which they took to get there was way out of whack. I don't understand that. But that wasn't the only move. They had a move where they cut Leonard Floyd and they cut Malik Collins. Initially, we didn't know whether those cuts were post June 1st cuts or if they were going to take those cap hits this year. And if they were going to take the cap hits this year, you totally understand because they already have 86 million in dead cap. Adding on to that is not going to be the end of the world as long as you're freeing up cap for next year. But they didn't do that. Much like the Javon Hargrave deal, they took a post-June cut with those guys, which means they're taking some of the cap hit this year and some of the cap hit next year. And already the San Francisco 49ers, who are sitting at 86 million and dead cap space this year from their roster moves, are now sitting at 21 million in dead cap space next year for players that aren't going to be here. So my mind starts to race as a fan. I'm like, hold on a second. We had a clear plan and I loved the plan and I was on board with the plan. But now the plan is what exactly? You add in the fact that when they cut Leonard Floyd, it was right around the time that they looked to be signing Joey Bosa, but that didn't happen. And then when they cut Juszczyk, it was right around the time that they had signed Luke Farrell. So you figure that maybe he's taking the place of Juice, and then Juice is back. It threw me for a loop. So my thought was like, man, okay, I can't wait for these owner meetings because we're going to hear from Jed York and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. And really, what I'm looking to hear is, are they on the same page? If I'm somebody that's covering those owner meetings, I am asking multiple questions, but the same ones with all three players: Jed York, Kyle Shanahan, and John Lynch. And I want to see if their answers deviate from each other. Are they truly on the same page? Do they truly have a plan? Will they divulge that plan? Are they in lockstep with the future of this franchise? Or is this just Jed York going rogue and saying, I'm the owner, I'm done paying, spent a ton of money last year, closing the pocketbooks, figure it out? I don't know. I don't know. And I still don't know. However, we got to hear from John Lynch about a week ahead of time. And for me, it was nice to hear from John Lynch. It was encouraging to hear from John Lynch because really, he was pretty candid in what this year is. He was pretty candid on some of their signings. He was pretty candid when it came to how he felt about not signing the big name guys in free agency this year. And so I'm going to go through and I'm going to dissect what he said and what he's pertaining to. And you tell me what you think. You tell me if you think John Lynch was open and candid, and if it makes you feel better. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you just trust that they know what they're doing because they built this up once. You trust that they can do it again. Maybe you don't trust anything they do. So it doesn't matter either way. But if you're like me and you had a lot of questions, hearing from John Lynch at this time was super important. So all of this went down at the Stanford Pro Day. And the first thing was he was asked about free agency because, as you know, the 49ers weren't really players in free agency. They signed a bunch of special teams guys, some backup guys, but they didn't spend that big money that we've seen in the past on top of cutting players. And so you start to think, is this team, do they think they're competitive? Do they think they can win a Super Bowl? Are they trying to win a Super Bowl? Are they even trying to be competitive? What is the thought process? And John Lynch flat out said, it's terrible. It's terrible to sit on your hands, was the quote from John Lynch, which means it's sucks watching from the sideline as all of your players that you've developed leave to go to other teams and you can't do anything about it. And on top of that, all the players that you would love to sign are taking big time deals elsewhere and you don't even get to enter the conversation. He said it sucked. It was terrible just sitting on his hands. But then he also talked about the strategy and he peeled things back a little bit. He said, we've got this thing called the draft and we've got a lot of picks. They do have a lot of picks. They have 11 picks. And I think the thing that fans should know is we have a plan and we are going to execute that plan. And we're excited about the opportunity. So they have a plan, which I don't think anybody questioned whether or not they have a plan, but how deep can this plan truly be? I mean, the draft is a crapshoot. You don't know how many players other teams have as first round draft grades or second round draft grades. You may really think that you can get a player at a certain pick, and then all of a sudden they're picked right before you. What do you do? You also may have a plan in the draft, but no matter what, you're talking about prospects. You're talking about players who haven't taken an NFL snap. Just because you have a plan, it doesn't mean that those players are going to fit the plan as you go along. It doesn't mean that those players are going to be good. And it doesn't mean that if they are good, that they're good right away. So the fact that they have a plan is awesome. I expect they have a plan. They're paid to have a plan. But executing that plan is something completely different. I'll give you an example. When they traded DeForest Buckner, they had a choice. It was either DeForest Buckner or Eric Armstead and Jimmy Ward. They chose to go with Jimmy Ward and Eric Armstead. But along with that came a first round pick from the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for DeForest Buckner. Their plan was to draft his replacement. They did that. Not only did they do that, they did it so much so that they traded back one spot in the draft with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did not want the player they were looking at. The Buccaneers wanted Tristan Wirfs. So they got an extra pick by trading back one spot, and they were still able to draft the player that they wanted, the player they planned on taking, which was the replacement to DeForest Buckner. That player was Javon Kinlaw. And Javon Kinlaw, for all intents and purposes, did not work out with this team. He didn't get a second contract with this team. He left after his 4 years. He went to the Jets, and now he's on the Commanders. So they executed their plan, but the plan was flawed. What if the plan was just simply to take the best prospect? And what if the best prospect was Tristan Wirfs? Boy, how good would it feel right now to have a young Tristan Wirfs on this team who started his career at right tackle, and is now playing left tackle, is one of the best left tackles in the game. I love that they have Trent Williams on this team. But I also know that Trent Williams is close to retiring. Very, very close. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years. Heck, it might even happen this offseason. I don't know. But I also know that Tristan Wirfs is an elite left tackle, and I'd rather have a left tackle that's, say, 28 years old and in the prime of his career that you can count on for the next 7, 8 years, barring something catastrophic, versus the situation they're in now. So having a plan and executing that plan really can only go so far because you're gambling a bit on prospects. You don't know how these prospects are going to transition to NFL play. You don't know how they're going to transition to your system and your coaching and your development. You know none of that. Having a plan is great, but this is high stakes gambling that you're doing with the draft. So that's something we have to keep in mind. Let's move on. There were some questions that he took about specific players on the team. He was asked about D. Winters. He said he'll have an opportunity. Basically, he was asked, is D. Winters the guy that's going to fill in for Dre Greenlaw? Dre Greenlaw left. Is D. Winters the guy? And he said, hey, he'll have the opportunity. I think a lot of guys, there's still a lot of time between now and when we play. But he's a guy that we like, and he's still growing as a player. Salah's here, and it's been fun to have a new lens on things. He's very excited with D and a lot of players. So basically what he said here is no guarantees. We have a lot of time, AKA we have a draft. And we are not going to let D. Winters stop us from drafting a player that we think might be better. And he, like a lot of players on this team who have flashed, are going to have to earn spots. This is going to be a competition. We're going to add an influx of talented young players. That's really the plan. Is we're going to add talented young players, and then those players are going to compete with what's currently on the roster, and may the best man win. And D. Winters is talented. We like what he brings to the table, but no guarantees that he is going to be a starter. We will see. I like that. I think that's the right culture. I think that's the culture that the 49ers have instilled throughout the years. But I do think that they've lost the plot a little bit with that. I do. I think that some players started but didn't necessarily earn it. I look at that same position last year and I look at Devondre Campbell. I don't think he earned that spot. I think he was a veteran who came in that they were desperate because they had just lost Kendricks to the Cowboys after he had committed to the 49ers. And at the last minute, he flipped and went with the Dallas Cowboys, and they panicked. And they went after Devondre Campbell and they promised him a starting role. And in hindsight, that was not the way to go. We would have been better off watching D. Winters flourish and grow, and they would have a better grasp of who he is as a player. So I like that he's saying these things, and I hope that the plan is because truly, I mean, there is a ton of roster spots that should be up for grabs. They have a ton of young players. We talked about this last week. Players that I think can take a leap forward. 5 players I named that I believe can take a leap forward this next year and really help this team out. And they weren't the Ricky Pearsalls, the guys that you would expect. They were guys that have been with this team and have been kind of laying low, but they now have an opportunity that they've never had. And so for me, when I look at these players and then I add those to the cast of characters that are going to be drafted, these 11 or so players, I mean, it could be less or more depending on trades. This is a great culture. This is a competitive culture. I love what I'm hearing here. He was also asked about Mac Jones. Let's not forget that Mac Jones was a player that they looked at heavily in the 2021 draft after trading to number 3, and it came down to Mac Jones and Trey Lance and Justin Fields. And ultimately they went with Trey Lance, but Mac Jones was certainly a big part of that process. So he was asked to kind of recall the draft process and how that went. And he said a lot of Zooms, a lot of Zoom calls is what we remember. We Zoomed about as much as anybody could. And then he was asked about the quarterback room as a whole. What does he think? Are they willing to bring in another player? And he said, I think we're pretty good. But his famous line, we'll never close the door. So most likely the 49ers are not going to be drafting a quarterback. We'll see. I mean, maybe there's somebody that Shanahan just loves that falls to them in round 5 or something like that. I could see a scenario there, but it seems like the quarterback room of Purdy, Mac Jones, and Tanner Mordecai, which is a quarterback room that I like. I mean, you've got Brock Purdy, who's your clear starter, hopefully your franchise guy. You've got Mac Jones, who's a clear backup, but a guy who can start in a pinch and can win some games and has some experience, but also young. And then you've got Tanner Mordecai, who's your developmental piece. Your I don't know yet guy. Maybe he's our long-term backup. Maybe he's a future starter in this league. Maybe him and Brock Purdy can both be starting caliber and we end up trading one of them in a couple years and get some extra picks for Tanner Mordecai or what have you. So they've got a nice young nucleus there that is also pretty talented overall and has potential. So I like that. He also talked about his trip to Oregon because he went to the Oregon Ducks Pro Day, and he said that there's a lot of talent up there. It was kind of like Michigan's Pro Day last year. Now, we know that Michigan last year had a ton of talent in that draft. It was absolutely crazy. And this year, he looks at Oregon very much the same, and I think a lot of people do. I mean, you've got a quarterback, a tight end, a wide receiver, a corner, a linebacker, a defensive tackle, 2 defensive tackles, 2 offensive tackles, an edge rusher. I mean, all of these running back, all of these guys potentially are going to be drafted at some point in this draft. So tons of talent in Oregon. Tons of people to watch, tons of people to be excited about. I'm an Oregon Duck fan, so I could talk Oregon Ducks all day long. But yeah, he's right. I mean, there's a lot of talent there, a lot of talent. Now, this next one was maybe in direct reflection of Purdy, but when he was asked specifically about Brock Purdy, he did decline to comment further. But basically, when it comes down to this year, he was asked about the strategy and what's going on, and basically he said the bottom line is you're always looking at years out from now. We forecast it, and we've got some big things coming our way. Now, big things coming our way, that sounds like some contracts, right? You got to pay Brock Purdy. You got to pay potentially George Kittle and Fred Warner. These are staples of your franchise. So we assume that's what he means by big things coming their way. I don't know. There's no big time free agents. Are they looking to make a big time trade? So the assumption is he's talking about those contracts. He will clarify later, though. He says, and you have to clear the requisite room to be able to do that. You don't want to get to a point where you have to do things to keep your roster afloat. You want to have that flexibility. So when I hear this tells me that they had two separate paths. They could have continued down the road of keeping pretty much this whole team together and saying, hey, lots of injuries last year, tough, tough schedule, tough travel. We're going to bet on ourselves and say that that's not going to happen again. We already know that the opponents this year, at least on paper, are much easier. We doubt we're going to be bit by the injury bug as much. We think we can compete, but in doing so, we're going to tie up a lot of future money potentially. Or we can say we tried over and over and over, and it just did not come together. Last year was really the last all-in year with this roster. We know we're not going to be able to get it done. It's time to move on from some of these players and some of these contracts and look towards the future. And that's what he's addressing here. And it's pretty clear that the route they are taking is to look towards the future. They also know that even in signing Brock Purdy and Kittle and Warner, they're still going to have future flexibility when it comes to cash or salary cap, rather. So that's the route that they took. Love to hear that. Okay. He goes on to say, last year we had such a good roster. I think we doubled down and said, let's go for this thing. And we kind of pushed all the chips in, knowing that at some point you're going to have that reset. Here's the key. And this was the year. We'll get back to that. He goes on to say, so guys like Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins, believe me, their impact was felt. They were great. It was nothing they did wrong. We just felt like it was the time to do it. And we're excited about what we can add and replenish. All right. First of all, I love that he specifically talks about Floyd and Malik Collins, because those are the exact names that I brought up earlier in this stream as to the ones that were making me kind of scratch my head. So he brings those two up specifically. He probably knows that a lot of fans were wondering, all right, hold on a second. Why those two? At least they were healthy. They're only under contract for one more year. Like, why do we got to do all of this? So he addresses it. But really, what he said was last year was the all in year. At some point, we knew we had to hit the reset button, and this was the year. So he's coming out. He's saying it for the world to hear. This, guys, is the reset year. This year, we don't expect to win a Super Bowl. This year, we don't expect to be as competitive as we were in the past. Now, that is not to be confused with conceding. they have an easy schedule. They do have a ton of draft picks. He's excited to replenish through the draft. He's talked about it multiple times throughout this interview. And if they can hit with that schedule, then there's a really good chance that they can still be a playoff team. But as far as winning the Super Bowl and putting our best foot forward, this is not the year for that. This is the step back year. So for me, I like to hear that because it does tell you that there's a clear vision. It does tell you that, hey, this is a 1-year thing, guys. We are not looking to not spend in the future and not be players in the future for free agents. We're looking to take that step back this year, take that giant step forward next year and beyond, and be right back in this thing, which is what I had hoped for the whole time. So for me to hear that made me feel really, really good that I'm not just taking crazy pills, because for a minute there, it seemed like, I mean, do the 49ers realize they're not contenders? Again, is Jed York forcing this thing? What is going on? This lets me know that, yes, they have a plan, and I picked holes in that plan. I did. But the plan really is, the overarching plan is, this is a 1-year deal. 1 year. Give us a year, guys. Give us a year, and we'll be right back in the thick of things. So that's what I loved hearing from Lynch. He was asked specifically about the Purdy, Kittle, and Warner contract. This goes back to when he said, we've got some big things coming our way. We have to clear the requisite room to be able to do that. Again, most people, I think, when you hear that, means, hey, Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Fred Warner. And he was asked about those contract situations, and he declined to get into the weeds with it. He just simply said, we love all of those guys. So true leadership fashion, answers the question without actually answering the question. So you let me know. Leave a comment. Do you feel better now that John Lynch has spoken to the media? Because for me, not only do I feel better, but the timeliness was fantastic. For those of you that tune in to every show, I appreciate you. 49ers Daily will be back tomorrow evening, where we are going to do our first mock draft together. Stay tuned.